Good afternoon and welcome. We're so glad you're able to join us this afternoon. Today, we are kicking off a series on stress resilience in the pandemic. My name is Haley Harris. I'm the Vice President of Human Resources and Planning at Ithaca College, and we're so pleased that you can join us today. These talks are sponsored by the Gerontology Institute's Finger Lakes Geriatric Education Center. The center has received federal funding through the University of Rochester for more than 20 years, and their mission is to deliver geriatrics education to the campus community, as well as to healthcare workers and the general public in 25 counties across upstate New York. In this unprecedented time, our usual self-care routines may not be enough. Here at Ithaca College, we recently conducted a staff survey and learned that mental health is very much a top concern for our community, and we're looking for ways to support our employees in that regard. This series is designed to help us discover new approaches to taking care of ourselves and others during this major disruption of our lives. We'll have a lineup of experts who will provide us with practical information and techniques that we may not have even known we needed. This is just the first talk. The next will be scheduled for Wednesday, February 10th at noon. So please do save the date, and we'll be providing more information very soon. But in the meantime, I'd like to hand it over to Barbara Ganzel, who's the director of the Gerontology Institute, who will introduce our first speaker. Thanks and welcome.
Good morning. The COVID-19 pandemic is challenging in every sector of the upstate community. At this point in the second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, we're in a situation that actually fits the definition of mass psychological trauma. We're all deeply in need of new strategies for resilience under stress. When we thought of doing this series, I immediately thought of getting Dr. Carla Cheatham to kick it off. When I first met Carla through the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization, or NHPCO, she and I were part of a formal NHPCO work group that's been developing its national recommendations for trauma-informed end-of-life care. That work segued to our doing a couple of national presentations together and co-authoring one of the first textbook chapters on trauma-informed long-term care. Carla began her career in psychosocial services with an MA in psychology, certification in trauma therapy, a PhD in health and kinesiology, a master's of divinity, before working for 10 years as an interfaith healthcare chaplain and bereavement coordinator. Carla now talks all over the country about what the fields of resilience, emotional intelligence, and post-traumatic growth have to teach us about what we can do to support ourselves and others, regardless of what is happening in the world around us. I'll now pass the baton to Carla, who's going to follow the chat. So put your questions in the chat, not the Q&A, and answer questions in real time during her talk. Carla will stay on after the talk to answer questions. Carla?
Thank you, Barbara and Lisa and everyone. Thank you. And Haley, we so appreciate your inviting me to be a part of this kicking off of this event. Very grateful for your trusting me to do so. As Barbara mentioned, we are going through an inordinate time, more difficult than most of us perhaps have ever known in our lifetime. Certainly for most of us, we've not seen our world go through such challenges. So we want to know, how is it that we come through this, not just surviving, but actually thriving through to the other side of this? So we want to look at the literature of post-traumatic growth, emotional intelligence, and resilience that can help give us some ideas about ways that we can come through this time better on the other side rather than worse. So as I am going through these introductory moments, I'll invite you, if you would, to type into the chat, and please, if you would, make certain this goes to everyone. I do want this to be interactive. So scroll down on the toggle and make certain you click that your message goes to everyone in the chat. Let us know what your discipline is. If you're a family caregiver, professional caregiver, if you're part of the IC community, kind of how it is that you come to this event today. That gives me a bit of an idea of to whom I'm speaking in particular, so I can cater the message to be a bit more appropriate appropriate for your needs. So as we look at these fields of emotional intelligence, resilience, post-traumatic growth to see what they had to tell us about ways that we can do things now to prepare for who we want to be on the other side of this, whenever the other side of this comes. We don't know when that will be. Certainly we have some hope coming in as the vaccines are becoming more distributed. And so we're hopeful. And yet we also in the healthcare community know that this will not be a quick and easy fix, that it will be some time before we actually can start to seem like the world might be going kind of sort of maybe a little bit back to some sense of normalcy. But even then, we know that the impact will be long lasting. Many of us are being impacted physically, definitely emotionally, as we're facing this potentially traumatic event. And then we're also facing some spiritual and existential challenges as we try to make sense of what the heck is going on and why is this happening and how can people be like X, Y, or Z. We know that many are facing the challenges of working more hours and being overwhelmed. One social worker recently described feeling like she was walking through molasses. We know that others are experiencing working less and having the challenges of a decreased income that hits into our feelings of value and worth. What does it mean about me if I'm not able to provide for my family as I once was, or if I wasn't able to work as I once was, or if I can't be face to face with patients and clients or loved ones as I once was? How do I work remotely from home and tend to my children while they're trying to do school from home, or send my children off to school and then be with them when they come home when I'm trying to work remotely? How do I handle it when my own loved one is in a facility and I can't see or touch or hug them? So many challenges that we are facing. We know that many people are feeling overwhelmed. They are feeling a little broken, maybe a lot broken. They're feeling as if there might be something wrong with them for the struggles that they're experiencing. And so many are questioning, what is wrong with me that I cannot seem to get myself going? And so we remind them, as we do when we work with people who are bereaved or going through any challenges or potential trauma, that there is nothing wrong with them, especially now. We are human beings having a normal human reaction to an incredibly abnormal event. And so if you've been struggling and feeling like you're alone, trust me, I've given this talk now several hundred times, especially over the course of the last year, to audiences all across the country and across industries. And everyone is feeling the struggle and the stress and the strain. So if you hear nothing else today, please hear this. You ain't crazy, and you're certainly not alone. So hopefully something today will give you a sense of renewed vigor, or a renewed sense of normalcy, at least for validating your feelings, and then will help you feel as if you can make it through the days ahead. Again, not that if you just do a gratitude list and do breathing exercises, it will be all puppies and ponies. No, that's not accurate. It's not going to be all puppies and ponies. It's still a hella hard time. Hopefully will give you some coping skills and tools to help you kind of rethink the way that you think about this period of time, your response to it, and some of the tips and techniques and tricks that you might be able to use in your daily life, both professionally and personally, to bolster your own sense of coping and resilience, so that on the other side of this, we will have decreased our risk for post-traumatic stress disorder, secondary trauma, moral distress, moral injury, and others. We'll talk more about in a moment. But for now, we do want to look at the impact of this grief and loss and trauma that it has on our health and well-being. I've already named several of those sources. We'll also analyze some practical solutions and what are the strategies from these fields that we can use to help us. And then I also encourage you to keep a scratch pad nearby or the notes open on your phone. And as we go through this time, jot down some notes. You know, many of us, I'm seeing, and thank y'all so much for sharing who you are and where you're working, a wide variety of providers here, both caregivers for parents and loved ones, as well as for professional caregivers. And so I'm seeing the wide variety of people who are here. So thank y'all for sharing all of that. As we come to these processes of care, we're accustomed to doing care plans. We're accustomed to getting into care routines for people that we are caring for. And so we do plans of care all the time for everyone else. And that usually involves a time of assessment, of assessing what are the strengths and what are the needs. And then a plan of care of interventions of the things that we are going to try to do to emphasize on those strengths to compensate for the needs. What are the interventions that we're going to try to do to interject some helpfulness to try to meet the needs that are present? And so be jotting down as we go through your own assessment of yourself, things that you think that you and your team or your family are doing well in terms of your physical care, your mental thoughts, your psychosocial spiritual needs. And so jot down some ideas about how well you think that you're doing, and by way of your own assessment of yourself and your people around you. And then, as also we go through, be jotting down some ideas of things that I say that you're like, ooh, I could do that, or ooh, I know to do that, but I've been forgetting to do that one. Or maybe I could do this in a little bit different way, to jot down the intervention. So what your plan of care is for yourself and for the people around you. And that will be, you'll be invited to share those at the end of our time. Now, let this simply be an invitation to slow down and be for a few minutes, because things have gotten quite frenetic outside of us. And again, even if your world has slowed down because of working fewer hours, then things inside of us, certainly neurochemically, have sped up as our threat arousal system is often through the roof and staying at that heightened state for a sustained period of time as we go through this pandemic. We want to be intentional. And so let this be a time when someone else can love on you for a few minutes and give you hopefully a bit of a breath of fresh air, as we think intentionally about who we want to be on the other side of this, whenever the other side of this will actually come. Because the time to practice that now, because minute by minute, decision by decision, indecision by indecision, we are determining now who we will be later. And so I invite you to think about that during this time, of how you can practice to build our own strengths. To build our own strengths. So as we know, and I love the picture of the little boy dipping his feet in the water. I think I'd like that to be me right now. So now, pre-pandemic, I would often speak to teams and to people and also family caregivers about burnout. Those are the workplace conditions that you see, those 6 listed here, that contribute to angst and frustration, feeling overwhelmed, undervalued, depersonalized, not supported, that can contribute to workplace burnout, that can be detrimental to all of us. And not just, again, in the workplace, but in our family systems as well. If we don't feel that we have these things, it can be incredibly overwhelming. Compassion fatigue is different. That's when the care that we're giving out overwhelms the amount of care that we're taking in, so that the cup of filling ourselves up starts to go down as we, as we give more and more and more and more. And that's when that compassion fatigue can set in. We're holding, our carrying muscles are holding. And then finally, if we're not sustaining those carrying muscles with enough hydration, nutrition, resources, oxygen, et cetera, blood glucose, there finally comes a point when the blood glucose in the muscle goes, we ain't got nothing left. Our carrying muscles have gone out. And so that compassion fatigue can set in. Now, that was pre-pandemic. Now, during the pandemic, we're aware that we are facing something totally different. Forgive me, I'm having a bit of a lag, so I'm having to slow down myself with the button so I don't advance too far. Now, I think of this as being burnout. Grumpy Cat, this is my first introduction to Grumpy Cat, says sometimes when dealing with people, you can't help but stop and think. Yep, I'm about to get my first assault charge. I don't know why I assume he has a Texas accent, or even that he's a he, but this is my first introduction to Grumpy Cat, and I fell in love on the spot. So this I think of as burnout. I think of this as being more about compassion fatigue, when we don't feel like we have it. I love this little Frenchie bulldog. I can't adult today. Please don't make me adult. Now, we will have days like Grumpy Cat and days like the Frenchie dog, burnout and compassion fatigue. That's just life being lifey. It's when those moments become more common. It's when they become the rule rather than the exception. And the trick to keeping that from happening partly is noticing when where the canary in the canary in the coal mines are going off for us, those yellow flags that pop up that we're really pretty good about ignoring. Often as caregivers, we're really good at caring for everyone else and not so good at caring for ourselves. We're really good at suggesting that others take care of themselves as part of a marathon rather than a sprint during a caregiving situation, because we know, excuse me, that often, especially when caring for a loved one, this will be a sustained process. And now for healthcare persons, that it can be difficult as we, healthcare staff and people that are working as caregivers in any capacity, that we are in this for the long haul. And so we need to save some reserves for that, for the entire journey, rather than just flame out and then burn out and have nothing left to give. And yet we're really good at telling others to do that, but not so good at doing so ourselves. It's just by nature of often what brings us to caregiving. Very often can make us really good caregivers for everyone else, but can make us not so good for ourselves. Now, the canary in the coal mine analogy, if you remember that idea, is the miners didn't walk past the canary in the bottom of the cage dead and go, oh, look at that, the canary's dead, and keep on going further in the coal mine. No, they knew if the canary was dead, it was the sign that they'd hit a gas pocket or there wasn't enough oxygen and that they needed to get out immediately. So what are your canaries in the coal mine? What do you notice when something happens and you go, ooh, that's a sign that I've got some burnout going on? When I am working out my control issues on the driver in front of me who've forgotten that the left lane in Texas is supposed to be for passing only, and they're blocking my way from going. If they would just move, I could go. If they would just move over, I could go. And when I'm losing my snot at them, thankfully just inside my head, and I promise I'm not saying, bless you, blessed child of God. I'm having not so nice things to say about them in my head. And I catch myself and I go, oh, Chappie, what's going on with you? That you have some control issues, that you're not tending to other places, that you're working them out on this driver in front of you, that's going to delay you from getting where you want to be for what, 12 seconds? What's going on? So that's a canary in the coal mine for me, that I have some oxygen, frustration, and anger, which usually means I have some burnout type of symptoms going on. When I whine, I'm not a big fan of whining. And so I don't like doing it. And so when I do, I do hear myself go, oh, I don't want to go do the paper. Oh, and even my friends will go, oh, we know that that's a do not pass go, do not pass, collect $100 or $200, but the extroverted Aries needs to unplug and go home and crawl into my cave and do some filling up of my tank, because if I am whining, it means that my compassion fatigue is amping up. So think about what your canaries in the coal mine are, and then be thinking about the things that you could do to respond, to make certain that you tend to that. Now, all of that was pre-pandemic that I would talk about. Now we have so much more triggers of helplessness and loneliness and isolation and overwhelm, so many potential sources of grief, both the primary griefs that we're facing as well as the secondary impact of that initial grief that also impacts us tremendously, that we often aren't aware of. There's that ambiguous grief of, there's this grief that I kind of feel, or angst I feel, and I just can't quite put my finger on it, which then means that grief is often complicated because we're disenfranchised, because we're not even aware of it, or others don't notice the impact of that sadness and that grief and don't know to support it. And then many of us in healthcare started out as the heroes, rah, we've got this. We're going to pull through this together and support our healthcare workers and our frontline workers, but then quickly became the hated when we were the ones standing in the doorway saying, we're sorry, you can't come in and be with your loved one. We know that our adrenals can only pump for so long before they start to give out. And so crisis fatigue has been coming and going as we rebolster for a period of time, and then we just don't have it. We may find times when we get short and snarky and sharp with people around us that we care about, and we're just not our best selves. Like, what is wrong with me? What is wrong with us as we're living during a time of pandemic? We're living during a time when the political season has been more challenging for people on both sides of the aisle than ever before. We're living during a time where there's a heightened, finally, understanding, although still not great enough, about the murder of our brothers and sisters of color. And so the mistreatment and the challenges there. And so talk about potential sources of trauma, seeing persons that share the color of your skin and the color of your loved one's skin murdered in the streets. And so regardless of your political views on such things, we get to notice that there's substantial trauma in our midst across multiple areas. And so, as we are trying to get clear about how to navigate this, we start thinking about all of these potential sources, as well as how they can impact us. Now, in healthcare, we already would talk about the potentials for moral distress and moral injury, and for all caregivers. Moral distress is when I know what to do, but I'm constrained from being able to do it. Moral injury is when I witness or I engage in behavior that goes against typical norms. We typically think about that for veterans, but we've been thinking increasingly about professional caregivers being in this situation as well. Well, now our ethics haven't changed, but the ethics we normally place on individual autonomy and dignity of the persons that we're caring for, it's now shifted to need to focus more on the needs of the greater good, beneficence and non-maleficence, not doing harm, doing the most good to the most people. So individual needs have been usurped by the needs for the greater good. And so our focus has not changed. We haven't lost our ethics about caring for the individual. And yet our focus for now during the time of crisis has needed to shift. So we find ourselves making decisions we normally would never have to make. Resource allocation, who does and doesn't get in, who isn't declared an essential worker. Even that term, I know the reason for it, but wow, how that has impacted people's psyche in the caregiving communities when they get deemed non-essential. And that can leave people feeling more devalued. Think back to the workplace burnout risks that we saw earlier. We know that trauma is when we face an event or a series of events. It can be a one big event that can have an impact, or it can be a series of death by 1,000 paper cuts of over a period of time that can lead us to have impacts. It threatens our well-being. We perceive that it threatens our well-being and how it can impact us across the domains over time. I use the SAMHSA definition there for trauma. And then vicarious and secondary trauma is when we see others experiencing trauma. We witness their trauma symptoms and the impact that that can have on us with our own vicarious and secondary trauma that we pick up from them can be tremendously challenging for us as well. Now, these are some of the symptoms of trauma. And so I'm not going to, symptoms of all of these things that I named before: compassion fatigue, burnout, moral distress, moral injury, trauma, primary and secondary vicarious trauma. I'm not going to go through all of these because I know that we're living them. But these are the things that can impact us physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, and socially, as well as our relationships can be impacted in multiple ways by the challenges that we are facing. And so, as we think about what it is that we can do to tend to and care for ourselves in the midst of all of this, we realize that, again, that fight, flight, or freeze that I mentioned earlier, that threat arousal as our autonomic nervous system and our sympathetic arousal comes up. And some of us are prone more to fight in response. Some run and get the heck out of Dodge and shut down, or just completely dissociate and truly shut down and freeze to try to hope that the bear will just bat us around and eventually get bored with us and leave without eating us or hurting us. We may find ourselves being quieter or louder, slower or busier. We may find ourselves more clear and hyper-focused. We may find ourselves more obsessive, a little OCD kicking in as we try to use control of everything around us to deal with our anxiety, to feel better about our world. So being gentle with ourselves and each other, whatever it is, however it is we tend to be responding, because everyone will have a different way of responding to these stressors and trying to cope. So as our defense mechanisms kick in, often without our really knowing it, the more we can be aware of them and have some gentleness about them and patience with them and understanding and compassion for them, then the better off we will be, and will be less thrown when we see ourselves acting in ways that we aren't typically accustomed to seeing ourselves act. And so as we, pardon me, I'm seeing us, there we go. We're seeing a prompt come up. So the good news is that we do not have to all go through this alone, that we can face this together in a way, pardon me, still having a bit of trouble with that delay, that we can find ways together to work together to come through this on the other side better rather than bitter. Now more than ever, we need to pay attention, because we have a tendency to put that Facebook perfect image out there. And so when we do that, people don't know to support us. And we also communicate to others that they have to keep their snot together too, that they're not allowed to be human and be real. And so now is the time more than ever, even if people look like they have it together, is to check in and say, no, really, really, how are you doing? Because inside, after we see other people's, we often compare our insides to other people's outsides. And we can just remember everyone is struggling in some way, no matter how they may or may not be showing it, because inside we know that we may be feeling and struggling with these types of feelings. Now, we know that we are more greatly at risk for trauma and for moral distress and injury, compassion fatigue and burnout, all of the things I mentioned previously, as well as vicarious and secondary trauma, when we have our own history of trauma, when we have poor boundaries, we don't have strong coping strategies, we have too high of self expectations, too much of that, I have to be perfect, I have to be good, I have to take care of everyone around me, and if I don't, they're not going to like me, and I won't feel safe. A sense of community and support, if we don't have such things, then we can really be more highly at risk individually. Now, if you have your own trauma history, which approximately 83% of the population in the US is considered to, is estimated to have some source of trauma in their history, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're doomed to experience these things. What it does mean, though, is just because you have a genetic predisposition to diabetes doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to become diabetic. It just means that we need to pay more attention than the average bear. So if you are one of the many of us who have our own history of trauma or traumas, then just know that we need to be paying more attention than the average bear to support ourselves. Now, the organizational or family characteristics that can lead to us being more highly at risk of all the isms I mentioned previously, all the struggles I mentioned previously, are the very same factors that can contribute to workplace burnout. And so the more we tend to those organizationally and as a family system and within our social systems, the better off we will be. Now, we know that resilience is that thing that occurs when we're able to evolve past a situation. It's when life gets lifey and knocks us down and we're able to bounce back to where we were before, to be springy, to be flexible, and hopefully with more wisdom and more compassion. There's a great review article on this, and you can Google how people learn to become resilient through from Maria Konnikova from the New Yorker magazine, of all places, one of the best reviews on resilience, both the history and the current research about resilience that you can find, so that you also will have access to these slides later. And I believe the recording will also be available for a period of time. And so that you can listen to this again, because I know it's a lot of information and I'm actually about to speed up because I want to honor our time. We'll be going right up until the top of the hour. And if you'll need to cut off at that point, you're welcome to. No harm, no foul, no offense. And for the Q&A, I will be trying to address questions as I see them on the fly. And I will likely miss some of them. So I'm trying to just work them into the things that I say when I see them come up in the Q&A, the chat on the side. But at the end, we'll have a more informal time for a few minutes after the top of the hour to answer some of your direct questions that I may have missed. But you'll have access to these later, but you can just Google how people learn to become resilient. And that is a way that a great review article where you can get some good information about the history and the current research around resilience. I did see a question come in about fawn. Fawn is when it's something that we're starting to think about as part of that fight, flight, or freeze. We're adding some other categories. Fawn is when it is a way of trying to placate the bear, tell the bear how amazing they are and that we agree with them, hoping that if we fawn all over them, then they will not hurt us. It's another way of trying to cope with a potential threat that we are noticing these days. So thank you for that question. Now, as we talk about resilience, one of the quotes from one of the guru researchers of resilience these days comes from that New Yorker article from George Bonanno. And he says, if you frame adversity as a challenge, you become more flexible, able to deal with it, move on, learn from it, and grow. But if you focus on it and frame it as a threat, then a potentially traumatic event, that's what he calls them, PTEs, because they're only potentially traumatic, based upon the stories that we tell ourselves about them, how our brains experience them. Because again, information comes into our brains, the organic matter of the brains, filtered through the autobiographical information and for the past information, and the lizard brain of the other portions of our brain, the amygdala and the hippocampus, and gets translated into through the rest of our brain as we make meaning and ascribe meaning and intention and purpose and our perspectives that we hold on what that sensory input coming into our brain communicates to our minds, and how our minds translate that information into the stories that we tell ourselves about that input. And so a potentially traumatic event, he says, based on the stories we tell ourselves, can become an enduring problem. We can become more inflexible and more likely to be negatively affected. Now we know that, again, at some point, life will start to resume to some sense of normal, although things will probably never, ever be the same again. We certainly will not. The question is, since we are going to be different on the other side of this, as I mentioned previously, who do we want to be? The time to decide and the time to begin preparing for that is now. I see a question coming in about, aren't some things truly traumatic? And that's definitely a wonderful discussion to have. There certainly are things that are traumatic to our bodies. There's no translation there. There's no perception there. But Nano's point and others' point is that how traumatic something can wind up being, how something impacts us, can be impacted, as we'll see here. So it's a great question to lead into the resilience conversation. Can have some impact on how it how it affects us in the long term. We'll talk more about that in just a second, but it's a great question. Because resilience, you'll see a lot of different models, the 3 C's of resilience, the 7 components of resilience, the 13. I teach these 7. I combine gratitude and hope at the end. Because I see these coming up as the most consistent and strong predictors of resilience in the literature. Again, it's about the perceptions and meaning making, the meaning that we ascribe to something. What are, you may know about the work of Marty Seligman and others in positive psychology. It's about our perceptions, our explanatory styles. How do we explain what's happening? Our brains need things to make sense. They need things to have meaning. And in the absence of a story that makes sense, we will make up a story. I walk by and say hi to John and good morning to John. And John not only doesn't say good morning back, John sneers. And I'm like, what did I do to John? Did he get hacked off at that meeting? Well, I did stand up him in that meeting, but I didn't think I was rude. Why is he snarling at me? John's mad at me. What? And I start to feel threatened, and I'm having this response, small t, trauma response. And then I realize later, I find out later, or I may never find out because I don't get curious about my story and I don't challenge the stories I'm telling myself. John wasn't sneering at me. John was trying, and John wasn't being rude, not saying good morning back. John was trying not to sneeze and sling snot all over me. I'm talking about snot a lot today. I feel like a 13-year-old boy with the body fluid humor, but was trying not to sneeze all over me. And he wasn't snarling. He was trying not to sneeze. And that's why I didn't say good morning. We make up stories all the time. Check out the book Critical Conversations, or Crucial Conversations, that addresses this, a brilliant book that I wish everyone would read. We make up stories all the time and ascribe meaning. We get our perceptions. We explain that things that the gods are out to get us. It's personalized. It's about me. That this is never enduring. That's all enduring. It's never going to end. That it's all consuming. That all of life is just completely ruined. And no, there are other things in our lives, not just the seemingly negative. There are other things that are also there. We just lose sight of that because our brains are more hardwired toward war than they are toward love. Our brains are hardwired to hyperfocus on the negative, and it's adaptive because we need to know where the fence is knocked down to the village so that the saber-toothed tiger can come in and eat us. It's called the Zeigarnik effect, that we're more likely to see the things that are imperfect or incomplete or unfinished or that we've gotten wrong or that are done wrong. We'll see all the perfection, but we'll notice that one spot of imperfection. We're drawn to it. Our brains are. And so we have to focus on not just focusing on the seemingly negative, but to challenge our stories and say what also is positive about it. So it's the difference between learned optimism, which is this is a challenge, and this is an opportunity rather than a threat. I may be helpless to change people and circumstances, but I am, may be powerless to change people and circumstances, but I am not helpless to take action on my own behalf. There are things that I can do, so that we get to focus on our internalized locus of control, which is a second and highly powerful aspect of resilience. We focus on what we can do. Now, we need time and space to grieve, to have our feelings and thoughts validated and normalized. We need to grieve and not just go from an awareness of our feelings and to jump straight into action and smush our feelings down. Then they come out sideways later, where they impact us physiologically and even socially without realizing it. We can't just tamp down the feelings. They need to be dealt with and addressed and validated. That's why when someone's stressed out, we don't try to go into logic, because if they're back here freaking out until they feel normalized, validated, heard, and joined and connected and safe from that social connection, then we can't get into that prefrontal cortex where executive functioning happens, where we can make logical decisions and think rationally. And so the more we keep our focus on, have time to grieve, and then there comes a point when, okay, given that this is the circumstance that I'm in, now what are the things that I can do? And we spend our energy there rather than spending all of our energy oxing over the things that we can't. It's about maintaining connection and community. Social contact theory tells us the more close, positive personal relationships we have, the more of a safety net we have, and we trust that when things are challenging, that we will be caught because there are people around us. It can increase our longevity the more that we have connection and community and people around us. And that then lets us be creative. Creativity is required to be adaptive and flexible in our coping. That means we're doing something novel that we've never done before. And so it's a creative act. And to do something new and different requires safety, because if I don't feel safe, I won't feel safe taking risks to do something adaptive and new. I need to know that if I try this and it goes amok, that net will catch me and that people will be there to support me. And so the more we feel safe and connected, the more creative we can be, the more we can get out of that freak out space of our brain and get more into the thinking areas of our brain where we can think rationally and calmly through, clearly and logically, to make decisions in each moment. And then therefore, the more flexible and adaptive we could be. Now, this means we also need to engage in self-care, which includes having good boundaries to protect ourselves. And when I train healthcare staff in particular, I say, we think of self-care as a good idea. I ask people about self-care and they're like, oh yeah, self-care, good idea. Big fan, self-care. Yep, good stuff. Know all about self-care. And then I'll stand on stage, because I'm typically standing in front of hundreds of people, again, different audiences across the country. And I'll say, okay, good. When was the last time you did self-care? And what is it that you did? And I'll hear crickets, because we know it's a good idea, but we don't often do it. And so I tell people, self-care is not just a fuzzy woo-woo good idea. It is our greatest clinical competence. I can have all of the best tools in my clinical toolbox. I can have all the best mnemonics. I can read all the books as a family caregiver. I can know all the things, but if I am not grounded and centered to wield those tools and that information well, I will be ineffective at least and dangerous at worst. And none of us got into this field or into caregiving for people we care about to be dangerous. So we can't not do self-care. I had an APRN, an advanced practice nurse, who said, 23 years and no one's ever told me that not only do I have permission to do self-care, it's actually a requirement to be an ethical professional. I said, yes. She said, 23 years, no one's ever told me that. And she said, even during a pandemic? I said, oh, baby girl, especially during a pandemic. Now more than ever, we have to take breaks to care for ourselves so that we can keep going. Now, this is also about gratitude and hope. Now, I mentioned earlier that our brains are hardwired here and so for the negative, and so we have to also let it see the positive. Gratitude lists are brilliant because they help us also see what is possible, what is good, that life, that this isn't all consuming, that this also exists. That this, the seemingly negative, that there's also this. And it trains our brains, it builds the muscle. Look at the Duke 3 Good Things study, where you spend 14 days, not more, not less, once or twice a year, 14 days, writing down 10 minutes before bedtime, 3 good things that happened that day. And then here's the most important part, according to the study. What was your part in those 3 good things happening that day? 10 minutes before bedtime, write them down They get more into your subconscious than as you sleep because you've rehearsed or practiced it right before you go to bed. And it lets your brain process it and work it into the deeper centers of the brain and form more neural connections. Dr. Genzel can tell us all much more about that than can I. So the Duke 3 Good Things study is brilliant to follow just as a practice. And so finding ways to practice gratitude and also finding our own sense of hope, our own source of meaning, whatever that is for you, not to impose upon others, but to keep you going. We tend to think that we need to give people hope, and we don't. The research shows that we can't. Brene Brown, if you're familiar with her, I'm a big fan. She cites the work of C.R. Snyder. And she talks about the fact that Snyder found in his research on hope that we think of hope as a feeling, and it's not. Neither is gratitude. I practice, neither is gratitude. I practice being grateful. I practice the discipline of being grateful, of gratitude, in order to feel grateful. But gratitude is a practice, not a feeling. Hope is not a feeling. It's a cognitive behavioral construct that we develop when we face challenging circumstances, have people around us who believe in our ability to find our way through. And then once we have found our way through, we now have built hope, confidence, if you will, that the next time we face a challenge, we can handle it because we already have. And so we don't need to give people hope. In fact, we can't, and we wear ourselves out when we try. People find their own hope, but we can help them build it when we show up in that middle ground and say, I believe in your ability to find your way through. And while you do, you're not alone. We're with you. So that it's not all of on all of us to have to give people hope that they can find it. And we simply get to be present with them as they do. So we get to, ask ourselves, what story are we telling? Are we telling ourselves a story of helplessness, that it doesn't matter what we do? Are we telling each other that it doesn't matter how hard we work, there'll be no choice, control, reward, protection, support, or consistency? Concerns will be dismissed as whining. Boundaries and self-care will be punished. Colleagues will disappear with no warning, or your questions as a family caregiver will always be, your decisions will always be challenged. And scarcity and fear will be our culture. You'll always be left guessing and wonder if you are next. I learned optimism is totally different. And it sounds like this. Things will change and we won't be able to stop it, but we'll work together to determine how we'll respond and to give you as much buy-in, control, and support as possible. Communication will be open. All voices will be welcome. We'll never allow anyone to throw you under the bus. We have your backs. Whatever happens, we will move through it together. And so I know people who have those 2 slides printed out on either side of their screens, and before they send out any message, memo, policy, whatever, they'll ask themselves, what am I communicating by the way that I'm speaking, by the story that I'm telling? And so we get to finish the circle, finish the story. Again, my mentor would say when I would grouse and complain, she would listen, because I was back here. She would listen. I hear you. I hear you. Sounds tough. And then finally, when I had kind of hit the decompression button, and she could see that I was now out of that heightened state, and I felt more joined and seen and connected, social support, community, then I could think more clearly. She would say, now, tell me the rest of the story. Finish the circle. And eventually I discovered what she meant was that these things were also possibly true. My perception may be off, but these seemingly, this sounds like challenging things. And these things are also true. You have people who love you and care about you and will always have your backs. You have a higher, she's my spiritual director, so she can say you have a higher power, a God who loves you, has a greater imagination than you do, and can help you find a way out of no way. You have people around you who will always have your backs and not let you wind up under the bridge with the border collies. You will always have people who will have your back. You're strong and capable and competent. Pain compels us towards greater health. And I believe in you and I trust in you that you will find your way. And so these things may be true, but these things are also true. And we can't forget about these, because we can quite easily, but when we do, it hurts us. And so we finish the circle. So that means if we're going to maintain our individualized locus of control, that second component of resilience, and manage the stories we tell ourselves, that first component of resilience, we've got to get past the seduction of the blame game. If only they would do things differently, then I would be fine. If only they would not create burnout conditions in the workplace, I would be okay. If only the staff would work smarter, not harder, then they would be all right. We've got to get past this and co-create resilience. What are the things that each and every one of us can do? What is my part in this? Because if I give my power away by focus on everyone else's fault and everyone else's responsibility and ignore my own, I give away my power. Because if everyone is responsible, no one is to blame and no one need get kicked under the bus. We want to be very, very hard on systems, but gentle with the people in it. Now, emotional intelligence. I'm going to skim through quickly with this. Based on the work of Dan Siegel and others and Goldman, we know that emotional intelligence has these 4 components in the literature. And the first and most important is that self-awareness, that moment to moment. And they use the work of John Kabat-Zinn and his definition of mindfulness, that it's that moment to moment, non-judgmental awareness, paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmental awareness of ourselves. Because if we're not aware of ourselves, we won't notice if we need if we're sucking at some of those components of resilience and need to strengthen our resilience in some of those areas that I just talked about. We won't notice when we're having disruptive emotions that go to the extremes and freakouts of shutdown or overwhelm and panic or anger or frustration. We won't know to go, you know what? We're going to bring it in. We're not going to put wear and tear on our nerves and our bodies and go way out here. We're not going to tell ourselves stories that freak us out. We're going to come in here a little bit. We're going to stay a little closer towards center, because we're going to get more information and get curious and get clear about what's happening and how we need to respond. We're going to stay here. We won't notice when we're out here and need to be reined in. We won't notice when we're not having empathy for ourselves, which is the 3rd component of emotional intelligence. When we have empathy for ourselves, we show up far better for everyone else. And we save ourselves wear and tear in our bodies, as I said. We won't notice if we're not being aware. We won't notice when we have our own biases and judgments coming up and storytelling about others. Had a mentee calling me yesterday, and she had all sorts of story about everybody else. And I finally said, when you drop the stories and look at this person just as any other human being on the planet, how would you respond to them? Because so much story is in the way. You're not able to do some perspective taking about what it's like to be them. And you're making it all about them, and you're giving away your power, and you're setting up a fight where it doesn't need to be. Have some empathy and compassion for yourself and for them. Let's go with the story. Do some perspective taking about what might it be like for them. And then when you do that, you're better able to handle relationships. Those are the components of emotional intelligence. Again, the first and most important is self-awareness. Now, I don't want to go through this for the sake of time, but I'm basically going to say post-traumatic growth is about what lets us make it to the other side. And a big part of it is acknowledging and grieving and dealing with those existential threats. It is about finding a meaning and purpose for ourselves. It's about reclaiming the nightmare. We're working with people who've experienced trauma and with children. And in my past life and working in trauma therapy and also working in child and family therapy, we would teach them when they had a nightmare, as soon as they woke up and realized they'd had a nightmare, to decide how they wanted that story to end instead and to visualize a different ending to the story. Back in the 80s, I had the choose your own stories and ending to the books. And so to do that, to reclaim the nightmare, to not let the neural networks get hardwired in of how bad that nightmare was, but to change the story. I want the bad guy to actually be a puppy that licks me all over the face and I'm giggling. Or I want to turn around and stand up to the person who's coming after me and tell them, no, you do not get to hurt me, and for them to shrink away and go and not do bad things anymore. Change the story, re-story the nightmare, find new meaning. Mothers Against Drunk Driving was about people who were fed up with kids being hurt and others being hurt and killed and injured in drunk driving accidents. And so they lobbied, and still we have a long ways to go, but they did a lot to change our laws. And then also about accessing and finding support within ourselves, with others, and with something beyond ourselves. Now, each of these things that I've talked about, again, mindful self-awareness is the most important and the most critical, because if we don't have those, we struggle. Now, think about doing that assessment. Where are you? How are you? What areas of yours need to shift and change and grow? Where could you spend more attention? Mindful self-awareness is a given. Everyone could stand to do that. Now, when I went through all of my work for 2020 as a speaker and a keynote speaker and consultant and coach went away on March 9th over the course of 11 hours. And I gave myself about 2 to 3 days. I said, you're going to take 2 or 3 days to be with the emotions, to grieve and to be with the emotions and let yourself freak out. So I literally sat on the couch, binge watching Tiger King over the course of 3 days, 2.5 days, eating Ben and Jerry's straight from, by the pint, and I'm vegan. And I gave myself about 2.5 days to freak out. And then I said, okay, time to get up. What is the stuff that you teach about resilience? Time to get up and practice your own resilience. And so I wrote this, which is the summary of all that I teach about resilience. And it became my manifesto for how I wanted to live and be and do during the pandemic. And so, because as one of you asked earlier, how do we cope when it's this ongoing, never ending? This is how I cope. Because it's not about a one-time thing. It is about a daily way of life, not just during crisis and potentially challenging times, but every single day. Because as I build these muscles, when other challenging times come, my muscles will be stronger and ready for them. This becomes a way of life, not just a thing that we do every now and then. So I have choices. I may not see all of them right now. I may not like any of them, but they're there. Reminding myself of this keeps me open to seeing possibilities I otherwise might miss, leaving me hopelessly trapped by my story. I'm powerless to change people and circumstances, but I'm not helpless to take action on my own behalf. I can set boundaries, ask for what I need, reach out for support from those who always have my back. If I don't yet have those relationships, I can begin to cultivate them by befriending myself first, then being the friend I want others to be to me. I can trust that something greater than me, a deity, the universe, love, whatever, has a greater imagination than I do. If I get still, get calm, and listen, I'll eventually hear it. From this place of peace, connection, strength, trust, choice, and hope, I will be my best self and I will be free, despite my circumstances. Now, this should still be open access in the Journal of American Medical Association. If you know the work of Shana Felt and others about the impacts of caregiving on people, these were frontline workers they did focus groups with to find out what it was that they needed. And so you can still find this article because it's small print and I'm not going to go through all of it. I want, again, to get to some other things before we end. But what they found that staff most needed and wanted was to be heard, protected, prepared, supported, and cared for. And again, the same can be true for family caregivers. And we aren't good, as I said, and the article authors also pointed out that we are very good at being self-reliant. So we need now more than ever to be encouraged to look out for help and support. And that we need genuine gratitude, not just, and thank you for all that you do with no actual support coming, but true connected gratitude and heartfelt thanks. Now, self-care, the biggest barriers I hear to self-care are these. We don't have enough time, we don't have enough energy, and we don't have enough money. And lovingly, I call bull on that. We think that they get in we think that they are the things that stand in the way of our ability to do good self-care. And granted, they can be challenging, but I re-envision self-care not as necessarily the things that we do. It's about being more mindful about the things we're already doing. So we're already thinking, so let's monitor our thoughts in a more mindful way. We're already using our words. Let's use our words in a more mindful way. We're already breathing. Let's be more mindful, intentional about the way that we breathe that can impact our bodies and our minds. We're already walking, we're already washing our hands, we're already walking through doorways. So let's do them more mindfully. And so it's about noticing that crazy inner roommate, that committee in your head that's always talking, that inner dialogue. It's about noticing the stories that inner roommate is telling and not shaming, judging, or evicting that crazy inner roommate, but making friends with it. And extending to it, I'm getting certified currently in internal family systems with Dick Schwartz and others. And self-energy, that deeper self that's witnessing that crazy inner roommate, is different, is separated. So it doesn't have to get hooked by the stories the inner roommate's telling, that I, thou, Martin Buber thing, or Michael J. Singer from Untethered Soul, that idea that there's this distance between our deeper, wiser self and that crazy inner roommate, inner dialogue. And so we bring this calm, curious, clear, compassionate, confident, courageous, creative, connected energy to that crazy inner roommate and see what it needs and honor it for trying to take care of us. And say, I get that you want to go control everybody around us and try to take care of us right now, but that's not going to help us. So let's talk about how we can do things differently so that you don't feel the need to do that. Don Miguel Ruiz talks about the 4 agreements, and one of them is to be impeccable with your word. And he says it's not just our words towards others. It's about the words that we use with ourselves. Polyvagal theory is the idea that there's this tremendous nerve, one of the biggest nerves in our bodies that runs from our brains down through our digestive system and our major organs. They're actually finding that SSRI, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, that antidepressant medications, they're actually receptors that where the SSRIs will actually impact around that nerve. That's tremendous nerve. And so that polyvagal theory is the idea that when we activate that nerve by humming, Singing, it runs down the back, around our throat, that if we hum, if we sing, and if we inhale more quickly than we exhale, it activates that nerve, which again, autonomic nervous system, that sympathetic arousal of there's a bear, I've got to fight it. We're really good, our bodies and brains are really good at amping up and doing the fight, flight, or freeze, or fawn, or all the other things that we're learning can happen as a result, as a way to try to cope with our defense mechanisms. The parasympathetic nervous system is what brings that down in the relaxation response. We do this well, we don't do this well. So we teach people ways to activate it. We teach them to shake it off. Go find an empty stairwell or a room or an elevator where hopefully they don't have videos, and go Taylor Swift and shake it off, because we have that energy come up in our body. And if we don't do something with it, it goes internalized as depression and anxiety and neurotoxicity, because we can't stay heightened, being chased by the bear, freaked out all the time. It becomes neurotoxic. Or we dispel it out at others. And so we teach people to do something with it. Zebras do it, dogs do it. Watch them after a scruff up. If we were live and in person, I would have you stand with me and literally vocalize and literally shake it all out. You feel better when you do it. And some of you just did, so kudos. It makes you feel better. And so you also can inhale for 4, hold the breath for 7, and then exhale longer than you inhaled. Exhale for 8. And that also can impact that nerve. When we are working, even if it's just virtually, we wear a badge. When we put on the badge, we're working. When you're a family caregiver, you can say that when you wear a certain ring, a certain necklace, I take this off. This is my talisman, and I take it off when I am not working as a sign that I am off duty. And so take off our badge and put it down and make a commitment to ourselves and our loved ones to really, really, really be off work, and to not pick it up again until the next time we need to go into work, and to not pick up worries and fears and stressors. Now, families, I know that you're not able to do that unless you have support and someone to come in and be of help to you. But finding ways, finding moments, finding times. You can do that 4-7-8 breathing on the toilet. You can do it while taking a shower. You can do it while sitting at a stoplight. We can, as we are washing our hands, we can, instead of singing happy birthday through or the ABC song through to make sure we wash our hands for 20 seconds, or while the 10 seconds for the alcohol to dry, we can say a mantra. We can relax our torsos and release our bellies. We can lower our shoulders away from our earlobes where they tend to collect. When we walk through a doorway or go into a Zoom room, we can pretend that there's a waterfall coming down through that doorway and washing all the negative energy off of us. And then when we leave that room, that meeting, that care interaction, we can let the energy of that interaction wash off of us, so that all throughout the day, we're offloading stressors. We can go through the ABCs of gratitude, because when I most need to practice gratitude, as one old boy in East Texas told me, when I feel the most pissy is when I feel the least grateful. It's when I need to do a gratitude list. So I got to go through the ABCs. What am I grateful for? It starts with A. And by the time you get to Xanax, Yellow, and Zipper, you'll feel better. Do it for 90 seconds as a group. Hey guys, we're going to do a gratitude list together and work on our resilience. What are we grateful for that starts with A? Apples. Adam. Cool. What about B? Bananas. Yep. Bourbon. Yep. That works too. And you'll laugh and you'll feel more connected, and you'll be reminded of things for which you're grateful. And so we can be more mindful in our eating and our walking. Self-care isn't about going and finding a yoga class, having the money to pay for it, finding the time in your schedule to do it, go and dig in the yoga pants out of the back of your closet where they have been on the floor since who knows when. And did you stitch at the inseam after the last time you did downward dog and they split open? Could you still fit your yoga pants? Could you still do downward dog? It's not about those things. It's not about time, energy, and money. It's about more mindfully doing the things that we are already doing. It's about reminding ourselves of our compassion, satisfaction, why we are doing this work. Why did you first get into this caregiving for your loved one or for people around you? And then why do you continue to do it? Compassion, satisfaction is the antithesis and the antidote for compassion fatigue. Doing self-care is not selfish. We high-achieving caregivers often feel guilty when we take time for ourselves. Selfishness is when I do something for me at the expense of you, but self-care is when I take care of me so I can bring my best self to you. And so whatever self-care looks like for you, even if it's knitting sweaters for cats with the ear holes and everything, find something to do. Find some way to work moments of self-care while you are already doing the things that you're already doing: driving, cooking, eating, breathing, thinking, sitting at stoplights, and the restroom. sitting for a moment with friends. And if you feel, I think the bigger thing that gets in the way is not time, energy, and money. I think it's that we feel that we are not worth doing gratitude. So go to Kristen Neff's website and learn more about self-compassion. Read any authors of Nepo and Mark Nepo, Brene Brown, Pema Chodron, Rachel Naomi Remen, Melody Beatty, Anne Lamott, Maya Angelou, Orion Mountain Dream, and others who remind us of that gentle voice that it really is okay, that it's not just fuzzy woo inner child work, but that it actually is. We can't give the compassion to others that we don't have for ourselves. If we're judgmental of ourselves, it will come out somehow, even as sideways at others. And so the more we know our worth, the more we are more mindfully aware. Some of the greatest predictors of whether we will develop post-traumatic stress disorder and how long the symptoms will last and how severe they will be are if we feel like we were able to take action on our own behalf during the potentially traumatic event and afterward, locus of control, and if we felt like we had adequate support, community and connection, both during and afterwards. So these are the things that we can do that are our best hope to not just survive, but to come through this on the other side. And so if you've been jotting down notes of where you might need some support, of where you might be able to better support and help yourself, of how you might then have some interventions to come in and based on that assessment, develop a plan of care. What are the interventions that you're going to put into place to care for yourself so you can continue to show up well for others over the long time? I hope that you will share it. And so whatever it is that you might change in the next 7 days, the next 24 hours, 5 minutes, within the next month, make a plan. Put your goals together. What am I going to do and by when? And who's going to help hold me accountable? I'm going to write them. If we think about it, we're maybe going to do it. If we write down, we're more likely to do it. If we write it down and tell someone else, we're substantially, according to the literature, more likely to do it. So write it down, tell someone else, and ask them to join you in taking on some of these practices. Now, if you need to drop off, I want to honor time. I appreciate the time. So I'm going to do a quick reading. And then after that reading, we'll spend some time cleaning up, answering some of the questions that I've not answered so far. And so hopefully something here has been helpful and has reminded you of the fact that you're not crazy. You ain't crazy, you're not alone. And has given you some tips and ideas for ways that you can support yourself better during the midst of all of this. And so you'll be able to come back and listen to this if you're needing to drop off. So again, my apologies for not quite getting things into the full time, but if you need to come back and hear more, the recording will be made available. So this is from Brene Brown. It's her Wholehearted Parenting Manifesto. And it is, and if you have questions and you're needing to go, type your questions in and I will answer those questions as we go. And whatever ones we don't get to, I can also send out and we can try to make those available somewhere later with, in addition to the slides and the recordings. But when she talks about wholeheartedness, I hear resilience. And this is the way that she wants to parent. So not to infantilize the people that we care for or that we lead, but how would it be if we were to all treat each other like this? And she says, above all else, I want you to know that you're loved and lovable. You'll learn this from my words and actions. The lessons on love are in how I treat you and how I treat myself. I want you to engage with the world from a place of worthiness. You will learn that you are worthy of love, belonging, and joy every time you see me practice self-compassion and embrace my own imperfections. We will practice courage in our family by showing up, letting ourselves be seen, and honoring vulnerability. We will share our stories of struggle and strength. There will always be room in our home for both. We will teach you compassion by practicing compassion with ourselves first, then with each other. We will set and respect boundaries. We will honor hard work, hope, and perseverance. Rest and play will be family values as well as family practices. You will learn accountability and respect by watching me make mistakes and make amends, and by watching how I ask for what I need and talk about how I feel. I want you to know joy, so together we'll practice gratitude. I want you to feel joy, so together we'll learn how to be vulnerable. When uncertainty and scarcity visit or a pandemic, you'll be able to draw from the spirit that is a part of our everyday life. Together we will cry and face fear and grief. I will want to take away your pain, but instead I will sit with you and teach you how to feel it. We will laugh and sing and dance and create. We will always have permission to be ourselves with each other. No matter what, you will always belong here. As you begin your wholehearted journey, the greatest gift I can give to you is to live and love with my whole heart and to dare greatly. I will not teach or love or show you anything perfectly, but I will let you see me. And I will always hold sacred the gift of seeing you, truly, deeply seeing you. And you can download this from Brene Brown's website, and it's a brilliant piece. I have it printed out on nice cardstock, and I give out to my teams, families that I work with. I have mine up on my refrigerator. So again, hopefully something has been helpful. And I'm going to check in with the chat, also check in with Dr. Ganzel and others and see if there are questions that I've missed that I can answer. But again, this is an opportunity for us to really get serious about how we care for ourselves so that it can transform the way that caregiving is done in the future. It can help us get really, really serious about how important it is to take care of us who are caring. Family caregivers, you're the silent victims of the caregiving relationship. We have not brought in the resources as our culture has changed. We've not brought in the resources to help and support you the way that we need to. As we no longer have families all living in the same community, but now the country and worlds apart, there's not the resources. We've not changed as society has changed to be there to support you. And so I'm not telling you if you'll just breathe into a gratitude list, everything will be fine. No, the system is broken. And until we fix it, we're working our butts off to fix it. But until we do, these are hopefully going to give you some means to cope, to not just survive, but to thrive on the other side, and to look for the ways that we can revolutionize and change the way we do things. And this pandemic is calling us to do that. We can revolutionize caregiving by how we care for ourselves and support each other. And so, Barbara, I'll check and see, and Lisa, if there are questions that I've missed that I could answer in our remaining moments. And thank you again, everyone, for the time. And if there's anything that I can do to be of support, please, by all means, reach out. Here is my contact information. Barbara?
Thank you so much, Carla. We will be, this has been wonderful. We will do our best to get this up and available to you on the ICGI website and or the ICGI YouTube channel as soon as we possibly can. The ICGI is the Ithaca College Gerontology Institute. Sorry about the alphabet soup. Carla has graciously offered to stay on the line for anybody who can stay. So if you want to talk with Carla more, if you have more questions, if she didn't get to addressing your questions in real time, which I thought was an amazing talent. Thank you, Dr. Cheatham. Please do stay if you can. If not, we will have the notes and also the recording available for you as soon as possible.
So any questions that the organizers have seen that I have missed?
Carla, this is Lisa. I see a question from a little ways back from Edie Reagan. I don't know if she's still here, but her question was, how do we maintain resilience when there is no end in sight to the challenges we are facing?
Yeah, and that is incredibly challenging when we start to lose hope. Again, those explanatory styles that I talked about earlier with Marty Seligman, is one of them is that things are all consuming, or that things are perpetual and that they'll never end. We know that things will change at some point in time. We don't know when, we don't know exactly how, but at some point things will change. We can always trust in that. And so we hold on to looking for the point when things will be different, and we don't wait for things to be different to look for gratitude, to look for hope, to look for joy, to look for the things that we can do, to look for those sources of gratitude, to finish the circle. We practice all the things. We get connected to people. We get reminded that we aren't alone. We get to look around and look up and look past the pandemic, look past the challenges and struggles, which can be hard to do when we're back here. But when we can be connected with people and connected with ourselves and connected with others and practice all the things that we know, then we can look past the fog and go, oh yeah, my kitty really is really pretty cute and sweet. My friends really do adore me. Man, that was a really cool book that I got to read last night. That hot chocolate felt really good going down my throat and down into my stomach, and I could feel it going, about down to here is how far I could feel it. But man, it tastes good, and I can still taste that lingering chocolate on my tongue. It's about that kind of mindfulness. Those minuscule, seemingly innocuous things, we string enough of those together and we will have one hella resilient brain and mind. And so it's not ever about being perfect. It's not saying, oh, okay, do this and it'll all be fine. No, it's still going to hella suck. And it can impact us far less when we can practice these things. Others, let's see, I'm seeing someone say, when you observe or bad or harm doing behavior, how do you balance compassion and stress managing strategy with calling someone to take personal responsibility for bad behavior? Brilliant question. So we never help anyone when we allow them to be their best selves. And what we permit, we perpetuate. So we co-create. So setting boundaries or stepping away is sometimes the most compassionate and caring and loving thing that we can do for another person, as well as for ourselves. So we can have compassion. Having compassion, doing perspective taking doesn't excuse unacceptable behavior. It just says, you know, I get it. You're doing the best that you feel like you can, and you're trying really hard to take care of yourself. And this is how you feel like you need to do it. I get that. That makes sense to me. Of course, that's what you feel like you need to do. And that's also, that behavior isn't okay. I'm not shaming you. You're not bad. But the behavior is not acceptable, and we need to find a different way to do this. And so you put the problem, if you can, not between you, so that you're doing this, but you say, how can we come alongside each other and put the problem in front of us and address it together? That way there's less of this pushback and more of a, I'm curious. And you have compassion, that self energy I named earlier on the slide with the thoughts, words, breathing, etc. And so how can we bring that energy to our interaction with someone else, and it will change someone else? Now, there can be times when you're doing caregiving and someone is going through their own traumatic event, potentially traumatic event, they're dealing with their own grief and struggle and anger. In the midst of that, they're looking to control whatever they can control because they've lost control of so many other things. And sometimes the things they can control are the people closest to them, or the people caring for them. And if they can pull those puppet strings, they feel like they can control something because they can't do all the things that they used to be able to do, drive their own car, be in charge of their own, whether the lights are on, what the temperature level is like, if they're in a facility, for instance. They can't control so many things they normally could control. So they start to control whatever they can, which often is pushing the buttons of the people around them and the people that they've helped install those buttons. And families, that's what we do with each other. And sometimes in the midst of dementia or other forms of cognitive decline, people's filters can go, people's ability to reason, people have been able to be their entire lives can become challenging as their emotional thermostat starts to shift and they can't control the emotional mobility as much, and they may find themselves lashing out. And so it's never about excusing behavior, but it's about understanding it and having compassion for it and getting some idea of why they feel the need to do that. And then from that more compassionate place, we could call them forth rather than call them out. Shame is about you are bad. Guilt is about I've done something that I don't like, that doesn't line up with my values or line up with the values of my society. And so that guilt is actually, according to the literature, it's adaptive. It's healthy psychologically because it keeps us mindful of who and how we want to be. Shame is toxic and it shuts us down. So that's the balance that we're looking for. Having boundaries. Holding your boundaries, naming behavior that isn't acceptable for you, owning your own feelings rather than making them responsible for your feelings, and then keeping compassion as you do rather than shame. And so I'm going to check in and see if there are any other questions that have come in that complex trauma or grief, what should be the first course of action if we know we are suffering from that? Finding a good care provider. And now more than ever, with care providers and therapists, psychologists, and others working online and remotely, then you have that much more access. I highly recommend EMDR as one of the best modalities for dealing with trauma. I also have found tremendous success, both personally and professionally, with internal family systems, which is a way of understanding the different parts of ourselves that reacted to the trauma and took on extreme beliefs or roles, and helping to unburden them from feeling like they need to do those things anymore because they may have been helpful at one point, but they're not helpful now. And so definitely getting support and finding supportive people around you who will understand that and have compassion for the process that you go through on your own journey as you begin to excavate and heal and grow and shift and change and move beyond and not just survive it, but thrive through it. So culture change within communities. Go to my website, share this, and any of the videos that are available there at carlacheatham.com. Share any of those videos that might be helpful. There's a lot about resilience there. Those are all free to download. So there's no catch there. I don't get anything from it, just getting the information out there, sharing this recording with others. What we do eventually will become contagious to others. And so we may say, well, gee, that's all nice and good if you have people around you who are also acting this way, but that's giving away our power to say that we can't change our culture. You know, if you think you're insignificant, what's the saying that from the Dalai Lama, if you think you're insignificant, try sleeping with a mosquito. The more we change, the more we invite the system around us to change. And so if we stay small and we say, well, we can't make our system or our family different because they're not acting like this, and so I can't. And so if I can't create a different culture because this is just the way they are. And sometimes there are systems that are highly resistant to change. That doesn't abdicate us from our responsibility of doing our part to show up in a different way to co-create resilience. Because if we are doing things differently, if we stand up and speak up and say, we're not going to talk about people like that here, that's not all right. Eventually, that kind of behavior will extinguish as more and more people then stand up behind the person who was brave enough to go first and say, you know what, you're right. It doesn't feel good to us when we talk about family members this way at team meetings. We need to shift our conversation. Of course, we're frustrated. Of course, we're angry. Of course, it's hard for us. And we still want to have compassion in the way that we speak to and about each other. Okay. In a non-shaming way, we can continue to call each other forth to be our better selves. All right, I am aware that we are at our time when the IT folks have been asking for us to cut off. If there are other questions, again, feel free to reach out to me. Hopefully this has been helpful. Thank you for the time, and what a gift to be with all of you today. Take good care of yourselves. Be good to yourselves because we're worth it. And when we're better to ourselves, we can show up better for others. And everyone wins in the long run. We will come through this. And as we do, we will thrive and be better on the other side. Take care, everyone.